Mistress demands Millionaire leave his pregnant wife, but his response leaves her in tears. Brace yourself for a shocking saga of love, betrayal, and heartbreak, set in the extravagant world of high-stakes wealth and power. Millionaire entrepreneur Thomas Greenwood appears to have it all: a booming real estate empire, a respected family name, and a radiant wife, Helen, who's pregnant with their first child. But beneath the glittering surface lies a ticking time bomb, a secret mistress, Ava Moretti, who demands he abandon his marriage. When an unexpected confrontation forces Thomas to make an impossible choice, his fateful decision rocks everyone to the core. Get ready for an unforgettable whirlwind of secrets, blackmail, and second chances. Thomas Greenwood was born into privilege. Raised in a sprawling mansion in Beverly Hills, he was the pride of his parents, the influential Greenwood family, whose real estate business had blossomed across the country. Everyone in those elite circles knew the Greenwoods. They were rumored to have ties with movie stars, political bigwigs, and even European royalty. Thomas, tall and dashing with a charming smile that promised untold confidence, took over the family enterprise at 27. By 32, he had doubled the family's fortune through a series of savvy business deals that turned him into a millionaire several times over. Yet Thomas was nothing if not human. For all the empire he built and expanded, he harbored insecurities that had plagued him since childhood. Raised to maintain appearances, he found it challenging to reveal vulnerability. People often speculated that Thomas Greenwood had ice in his veins, his every move perfectly calculated for maximum profit. But in reality, he was a man desperate for acceptance and genuine human connection, which was exactly why, at business school, he fell instantly for Helen Davis. Helen Davis, now Helen Greenwood, was as different from Thomas as day from night. She was unpretentious, affectionate, and down-to-earth. There was also a certain elegance in her simplicity. She didn't come from wealth, yet she carried herself with a quiet dignity that outshone diamonds. She worked her way through scholarships at Stanford, balancing 2 part-time jobs and countless volunteer hours at local shelters. If Thomas was the symbol of inherited wealth and refinement, Helen represented hard work, compassion, and warmth. Their marriage stunned high society, with many doubting it would last. Their union, however, defied every skeptic. She brought out the best in him, coaxing out the warmth he often repressed. And he offered her the security and means to pursue her philanthropic dreams, a future where she could lend her time and money to help causes close to her heart. They became an inimitable power couple, Thomas the astute businessman, Helen the heart-centered humanitarian. When Helen announced her pregnancy, nearly everyone who knew them was thrilled. Her philanthropic work naturally took a back seat while she focused on resting, ensuring a safe pregnancy. Behind closed doors, however, Thomas was fighting demons he couldn't easily share. He wanted to be the perfect father and husband, but the demands of his growing empire were more daunting than ever. Deals demanded more travel, late nights, and endless business meetings. Inside the fortress of his heart, doubt found room to grow. Little did he realize that in his loneliness and stress, a single spark of temptation would set ablaze a series of catastrophic events. Ava Moretti worked as a junior financial consultant in one of Thomas's international offices, located in Rome. Fluent in several languages and armed with an impressive resume, she was an asset from the day she joined Greenwood Real Estate's European division. Ava was not just another pretty face. She was ambitious, confident, and enthralled by the high society she saw in magazines. By her mid-20s, she'd set her sights on building a powerful network that could launch her into the upper echelons of wealth. She was, in short, a go-getter, someone who would bend rules if necessary to climb the ladder. Thomas first encountered Ava at a corporate gathering in Paris. His firm had just closed a monumental property deal in the heart of the City of Lights, and celebrations ensued. Among the crowd of executives, Ava stood out. Dark, flowing hair, poised posture, and a designer dress that accentuated her natural elegance. She radiated confidence, and it didn't take long for her to approach Thomas with a warm smile and a champagne flute in hand. "I just wanted to say congratulations on the acquisition," she said, in French accented English. "Greenwood Real Estate has really been making waves across Europe." Thomas smiled, his standard charismatic grin. "Thank you, Miss Moretti. Ava Moretti. I've been with the Rome office for 6 months now." She extended her hand, and he took it with a polite nod. "Well, Miss Moretti," he said, switching to fluent Italian to match her background, "I hear excellent things about your work. Thank you for everything you've done to secure this deal." Her eyes lit up, impressed by his language skills. That spark of interest, invisible to everyone but them, flickered into life. Over the next few hours, they engaged in polite conversation that glided seamlessly from corporate strategy to light-hearted jokes about tourist traps in Italy. It was harmless enough, just an interaction between a boss and a promising employee, or so Thomas told himself. Yet, as the night wore on, they found each other's presence increasingly magnetic. Thomas, feeling the weight of negotiations and an ocean away from his wife, found it refreshing to talk with someone who wasn't overshadowed by the enormity of the Greenwood name. Ava, on her part, saw in Thomas not just a high-profile executive, but a man who visibly shouldered the burdens of a daunting empire. She sensed vulnerability, masked under confidence, a need for genuine human connection that only grew stronger the more champagne they consumed. Nothing happened that night beyond conversation, but they exchanged private numbers under the guise of staying in touch for business. The seed of temptation was planted, soon to be watered by text messages, late-night calls, and eventual confessions of loneliness. Back in Beverly Hills, Thomas tried to keep his life steady. Helen's pregnancy progressed well, and she was glowing with excitement. She'd begun to decorate the nursery, choosing neutral colors because they wanted the baby's gender to be a surprise. The two of them fell asleep most nights, looking at baby name books, flipping pages and laughing at the silliest ones. Times like these, Helen thought, were perfect. She counted her blessings, never once suspecting that her husband's mind might be drifting to someone else across the globe. Thomas, though deeply fond of Helen, discovered that his mind wandered to Ava whenever he felt anxious or overwhelmed. She was exciting in a different way, her European charm, her raw ambition, the texts she'd send praising his leadership. He often rationalized his interest in her as business mentorship or simply good rapport between a CEO and an up-and-coming talent. But it soon crossed professional lines when they began video calling late at night. Conversations turned from, "How can we improve the profit margins on the Milan property?" to "What do you do when you can't sleep?" and "God, I wish I wasn't alone tonight." One afternoon, after securing a deal in Milan, Thomas found himself in a plush hotel suite, exhausted yet unable to sleep. Ava messaged him, "Are you still in Milan? I'm here for a meeting. Would love to celebrate our success over dinner." He glanced at the time, 7:00 p.m. He typed back, "Dinner sounds nice." That night changed everything. What started as a casual meal in an upscale restaurant near the Duomo ended as a heated kiss in front of Ava's hotel room door. Thomas experienced an internal whirlwind of regret and exhilaration. Ava whispered, "Stay with me tonight," her hand lingering on his chest. Every bit of him screamed that this was a betrayal he'd never come back from. He tried to remember Helen's face, her gentle smile, but the loneliness and the high of success consumed him. He slipped inside, and the affair began in earnest. They spent 3 intoxicating nights in Milan before Thomas returned to Beverly Hills. On the flight home, guilt crashed down on him. He resolved it had been a one-time slip, a costly mistake. He swore never to do it again. He clung to the hope that distance would make the feverish connection fade. But Ava persisted. She sent messages, pictures, voice notes that brought those memories rushing back. The lines between never again and just once more became dangerously blurry. If temptation had been strong before, it was now an unrelenting force. Ava flew to Los Angeles under the guise of corporate training arranged through Greenwood real estate. In truth, she orchestrated the entire trip. She wanted a piece of Thomas's life in Beverly Hills, wanted to see how the other half lived, and test the boundaries of his world. The moment Thomas saw her standing in his plush office, wearing a fitted navy suit and that same confident smile, his heart pounded like a drum. He escorted her to the boardroom to introduce her to senior staff, feeling more vulnerable than he had in years. Helen began to notice Thomas was growing distracted. He would leave home early, return late, and constantly be on the phone, replying to messages he claimed were urgent company matters. Although Helen understood corporate pressures, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was amiss. She reached out to his sister, Caroline Greenwood, confiding her concerns. Caroline, fiercely protective of her brother, tried to reassure Helen that the real estate business was cutthroat and that his schedule had always been hectic. Still, Helen sensed a shift in his demeanor, a coldness in his once gentle gaze. It all came to a head when Helen decided, with no warning, to drop by the Greenwood corporate office to surprise Thomas with lunch. She carried a neatly wrapped bento box, the aroma of his favorite Asian fusion dish wafting through the corridors. As she approached his office, she heard muffled voices. One was Thomas's, the other a woman's with a slight accent. Intrigued, Helen put her ear to the door, her heart beating fast. She couldn't make out the exact words, but the tone was intimate, the kind of warmth one doesn't typically hear in a business setting. Though she didn't barge in, Helen's instinct told her something was wrong. She slid into a nearby waiting area. Minutes later, Ava Moretti exited the office, looking smug, her phone in hand. Helen froze at the sight of this stylish, captivating woman who moved with a confidence that felt out of place. When Ava noticed Helen, she paused for a second as if to size her up. Their eyes locked. There was no open confrontation, just a flicker of tension. Ava sauntered off, leaving Helen's stomach twisted in knots. Thomas was startled when Helen walked into his office, lunchbox in hand. He pasted on a bright smile, but she wasn't fooled. She asked, "Who was that?" Thomas scrambled for an explanation, calling Ava a European consultant. Helen pretended to believe him for the moment. But the cracks in their facade were deepening, and neither of them knew just how devastating the fallout would be. Ava's ambition had no end. She relished the idea that she had ensnared a married millionaire, particularly one with the social standing of Thomas Greenwood. But Ava didn't simply want to be a mistress. She wanted to be the new Miss S. Greenwood. She knew that Helen was pregnant, which complicated matters. But Ava believed that if she couldn't charm Thomas into leaving Helen, she could manipulate him into it. She began staging coincidental encounters, arriving at the same events, ensuring the paparazzi or society photographers snapped photos of her in close proximity to Thomas. Subtly, she hinted that she was prepared to leak their affair if he didn't do something soon. Thomas attempted to keep calm, but every new text or voicemail from Ava set him on edge. He feared the scandal that would erupt if the affair went public. The media frenzy, the stock prices, the effect on Helen's delicate pregnancy. He urged Ava to maintain discretion and promised they'd talk once he sorted things out. She seemed mollified, but only for a short while. Back in the Greenwood estate, Helen was navigating a tumult of her own. She found hotel receipts in Thomas's coat pockets, names of places he was never supposed to be. Credit card bills revealed lavish charges that he refused to explain. She tried to confront him multiple times, only to be met with half-truths. Helen was no fool. She understood he was hiding something, and that something likely had a name: Ava Moretti. The emotional toll made her pregnancy more stressful than it should have been. Nights found her sobbing silently, wondering how she could salvage the marriage she cherished. Eventually, Helen decided to fight for her relationship. She hired a private investigator, Joshua Ramirez, a discreet but effective man recommended by a friend. The first time they met, Joshua explained, "Mrs. Greenwood, I know this is hard, but if you want the truth, we'll find it." She steeled herself, feeling a nauseating guilt for digging into her husband's private life, but also a fierce determination to protect her unborn child and her family's dignity. Meanwhile, Thomas tried to juggle his double life, clueless that someone was watching him from a distance. In a posh restaurant nestled in the Hollywood Hills, Ava cornered Thomas one evening. She arrived wearing a figure-hugging red dress, a bold choice intended to capture attention. Thomas looked around nervously, hoping they wouldn't be seen by a friend or colleague. As soon as he slid into the booth, Ava leaned across the table, her red lips curving into a knowing smile. "I can't keep sneaking around like this," she said quietly, eyes locking with his. "You keep telling me to be patient, but I deserve more than stolen nights in hotel rooms," Thomas swallowed. "Ava, you know my situation. Helen is pregnant. I can't just—" She cut him off. "Yes, I know she's pregnant. And you need to stop using that as an excuse. You told me you're unhappy, that you don't feel alive anymore. Now's your chance to change that." He exhaled sharply, desperate to avoid making a scene. "Look, let's discuss this calmly. I never said I was going to abandon Helen. She's carrying my child. I can't do that to her." Ava's eyes flashed with frustration. "So you want me to remain your secret, the hidden mistress of Thomas Greenwood? I won't. Either you leave her, or I'll make sure everyone knows about us, including Helen." Thomas's heart hammered. "You're blackmailing me? It's not blackmail if it's the truth. But if you want to keep living this lie, you can. Just know that I won't remain quiet forever." Thomas, the charismatic billionaire who'd negotiated countless business deals, found himself cornered by a single demand he couldn't resolve with money. The conversation ended on a tense note, with Ava storming out in a huff. In that moment, Thomas realized that everything he built his empire, his marriage, his future fatherhood, was hanging by a thread. Helen's private investigator, Joshua Ramirez, left no stone unturned. He discreetly followed Thomas's movements, from early morning commutes to late-night dinners. He obtained security footage from high-end hotels and even used a small drone to capture images on private properties. Over the course of 2 weeks, he compiled a dossier that confirmed Helen's worst fears. Photos and videos of Thomas and Ava in passionate embraces, entering hotels after midnight, leaving expensive boutiques with bags in hand. The evidence was damning. Helen met Joshua in a dimly lit cafe to collect the results. She opened the file with trembling fingers, tears forming in her eyes as she saw the undeniable proof of Thomas's infidelity. "I'm sorry," Joshua said quietly, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "I'll keep this confidential, but you deserve to know everything." Helen swallowed her tears, determined to remain dignified in a public setting. She thanked Joshua and left, her whole world seemingly spinning out of control. That evening, Helen confronted Thomas. She spread the photos across a table in the living room. He walked in, dropping his briefcase with a thud when he realized what lay before him. Helen's voice trembled with both rage and heartbreak. "So it's true, all of it." Thomas felt as if an icy wind had chilled him to the bone. He tried to formulate an excuse, but the pile of photographs left no room for lies. They argued, voices growing louder until the staff scattered like frightened mice. The shouting reached its peak when Helen clutched her swollen belly and gasped in pain. Instantly, Thomas's rage turned to panic. He helped her sit down, calling for the family doctor. The doctor arrived and checked Helen's vitals, warning that stress could trigger early labor or other complications. With tears in her eyes, Helen stared at Thomas, her entire body trembling. "It's over," she whispered, her voice choked. "Our marriage, our happiness, I don't see how we recover from this. I've never felt so betrayed." Thomas tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Guilt coursed through him, and for the first time he realized just how much he stood to lose. Thomas spent the night in the guest bedroom, too overwhelmed by guilt to face Helen. The next morning he found her in the nursery, gazing at the half-painted walls and partially assembled crib. She looked exhausted, eyes puffy from crying. Approaching her cautiously, Thomas tried to speak, but she wouldn't turn around. Finally, she broke the silence. "How long has it been going on?" He steadied himself, admitting, "A few months. It started as just texts and calls. Then it crossed a line. I was weak, stressed." Helen spun around, fury in her eyes. "Don't you dare blame this on stress. You had an affair. You let another woman into our marriage while I was carrying your child. You lied to me, Thomas." The look on her face cut him to the core. He tried to hold her hand, but she pulled away. I'm sorry," he managed. "I never intended for this to go so far. I love you, Helen. I truly do." Her eyes flared, tears threatening to spill again. "You love me? You have a terrible way of showing it." Thomas's mother, Elizabeth Greenwood, arrived unexpectedly, perhaps alerted by the staff's worried whispers. She found them in the nursery, tension so thick it was almost palpable. Elizabeth had heard rumors of Thomas's affair. Word travels fast among the Beverly Hills elite, but she hoped they were unfounded. Seeing the devastation on Helen's face, Elizabeth understood it was all true. Taking a deep breath, she walked over and enveloped Helen in a gentle hug. "We'll sort this out, dear," Elizabeth whispered. "I'm here for you, whatever you need." Helen nodded through tears. For the first time since discovering the affair, she felt a supportive presence in the Greenwood family. Thomas stood there, ashamed and speechless. He knew he had to act. If he wanted to save his marriage, the mother of his child, he had to end the affair once and for all. While Thomas was reeling from the confrontation at home, Ava was busy plotting her next move. She had grown tired of waiting for him to leave Helen, and after their tense dinner in the Hollywood Hills, she decided to escalate. She sent Thomas an urgent text. "We need to talk now." Thomas groaned when he saw it, but he knew ignoring her would only inflame the situation. They met at a luxurious penthouse suite in downtown Los Angeles, the same location where they'd once shared stolen kisses. Ava paced the living room, her stiletto heels echoing on the marble floor. As soon as Thomas walked in, she confronted him with a stack of printed photos. They were pictures of them together in Milan, Paris, Beverly Hills, clear evidence of their affair. She'd apparently hired her own photographer or purchased them from paparazzi. "You think I'm bluffing?" she hissed, slamming the photos onto a glass coffee table. "I can ruin your reputation, crash your company's stocks, drag your name through the mud. And I will if you don't do what I want." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "Ava," I said, "I'd handle this." Her face hardened. "Your wife is pregnant and you're still with her. You promised me you'd leave her, that you'd never felt so alive as when you were with me. Were those just sweet nothings to get me into bed?" Thomas ran a hand through his hair, desperation in his eyes. It's complicated. The baby changes everything. I can't just walk away from my responsibilities. So you're choosing her, the child, and a life of boredom. That's what you're telling me." He struggled for composure. I'm not choosing anything yet. But I can't abandon my pregnant wife. Not like this. Ava scoffed, tears of rage forming. Oh, so now you have morals. Where were they when you were in my bed, night after night? Thomas stared at the photographs again, knowing the damage they could inflict. If you leak these, you'll destroy us both. The media will vilify you too. You won't gain anything from this scandal. She paused, her voice quieter but still firm. There's another way. If Helen divorces you first, then we can be together publicly, without it looking like you just abandoned a pregnant wife. Maybe we can paint her as cold or uninterested in your needs. People love drama. We'll spin the narrative. Thomas shook his head, appalled by the suggestion. You're talking about manufacturing lies to attack Helen? I won't do that. Ava's eyes narrowed to slits. Suit yourself. But if you don't leave her, and soon, I'll do what needs to be done. I'll let the world know about the affair. And I promise you, my version of the story will paint you in a far worse light than me. Thomas turned to leave, feeling more trapped than ever. As he closed the door behind him, Ava sunk onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. She had not counted on falling for him so deeply, but she felt she had no choice. Love had morphed into an obsessive need, fueled by jealousy and a hunger for a place in the life she believed she deserved. Overcome with dread, Thomas returned to the Greenwood estate. He found Helen seated in the library, a place she often went to find solace among rows of leather-bound classics. She looked fragile, clutching a warm cup of tea with shaking hands. He sat down across from her, his voice subdued. Helen, I need to tell you everything. She listened as he laid bare how it started, how it escalated, and how Ava was now threatening to expose them both. Helen's tears never ceased, but she kept composure, forcing herself to hear every ugly detail. When he finished, he leaned forward, eyes brimming with remorse. Helen, I'm begging you. I made a terrible mistake. I'll cut all ties with her, I swear. I just need time to handle this carefully. She's threatening to go public. Helen raised a hand, silencing him. Do you think I care about the public scandal right now? I'm worried about our child's future, Thomas. I'm worried about our family. You've destroyed my trust. How do I believe a word you say now? Thomas felt a wave of despair. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, Helen, you have to believe I love you more than anything. She regarded him with a haunted look. Love isn't supposed to feel like a nightmare. I need time, Thomas. I can't just forgive you immediately. I don't even know if I can forgive you at all. He moved closer, carefully taking her hand in his. To his relief, she didn't pull away this time. I understand. But I won't leave you. I won't abandon our child. I'll protect us from her threats, no matter what it takes. Helen closed her eyes, tears tracing down her cheeks. Thomas, the stress is unbearable. For the baby's sake, I need peace. That means you either handle Ava swiftly or I'll walk away. And don't think I'll let you forget your obligations to this child. In a calculated move, Thomas sought legal counsel from the Greenwood family's attorney, Robert Bob Ellington, a seasoned professional known for crisis management. Bob listened intently to Thomas's predicament and offered a sober assessment. Miss Moretti has limited legal grounds for blackmail unless you've committed a specific crime she can expose. However, the scandal alone could severely harm Greenwood real estate and your personal standing. But we have options. First, we could gather evidence of her own misconduct to neutralize her threats. Second, we might negotiate a settlement that ensures her silence. Neither is pretty, but we must be pragmatic. Thomas nodded, hating every part of this conversation. He never wanted to stoop to a hush-money arrangement, but he was running out of choices. Bob mentioned one more angle. If you genuinely want to reconcile with Helen, you need to show your unwavering commitment. Publicly, if possible. Events, interviews, charitable appearances, anything that reaffirms your devotion to her. That might lessen the impact if Ava goes public. Meanwhile, Ava discovered Thomas was seeking legal help and realized her time was running out. She escalated her demands, texting him, "I don't want your money. I want you." She followed up with snapshots of them together, threatening to send them to tabloids. Thomas, reeling from guilt, frustration, and fear, blocked her number but knew she could easily create new ones. Ava also tried to contact Helen directly. One evening, Helen's phone buzzed with an unknown number. When she answered, Ava's voice slithered through the line. "I'm so sorry about all this. I never intended to hurt you." Thomas said you two were practically separated, that you were staying together just for the baby. "I see now that he lied to both of us." Helen's heart pounded. "How dare you call me after what you've done?" Ava sighed theatrically. "He's manipulated us both. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. If you want to talk woman to woman, I'm here." Helen nearly threw her phone against the wall. That was the last straw. Elizabeth Greenwood invited Helen to lunch at her private garden. Elizabeth had sensed the growing storm and wanted to offer whatever comfort or wisdom she could. Over delicate tea sandwiches, Elizabeth confided, "When I married Thomas's father, Leonard, we also had our share of challenges. There were temptations everywhere, people who wanted to come between us. It wasn't easy, but we fought for each other." Helen, her eyes rimmed with tears, asked, "How did you survive it?" Elizabeth placed a gentle hand on Helen's. "When two people truly love each other, they can overcome even the darkest times. But trust is everything. It may take years to rebuild it, if it's possible at all. The question is, do you believe Thomas loves you enough to change? And are you willing to forgive if he does?" Helen stared at the manicured rose bushes, wishing for a fraction of their simple, unencumbered beauty. "I don't know," she whispered. "Some days I want to pack my bags and never look back. Other days I remember the Thomas I fell in love with, and I want that man to father our child." Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "That man still exists, but only you can decide if it's worth the fight." Helen left that lunch feeling slightly more resolute. The stakes were higher than ever. She was carrying the next Greenwood heir, and Elizabeth, along with everyone else, hoped that this child would come into a stable family. Yet for Helen, stability seemed like a distant dream, overshadowed by Ava's looming threats and Thomas's betrayal. With Bob Ellington's guidance, Thomas arranged a press conference under the guise of announcing a major Greenwood real estate philanthropic initiative. The plan was to showcase Thomas and Helen's united front, thereby undermining any scandal. Ava might unleash. Helen agreed, albeit reluctantly, driven by a sense of duty to protect her child's future and the family name. She didn't love the idea of standing beside the husband who had betrayed her, but this was damage control. On a bright afternoon, the couple stood in front of the media at a newly renovated community center for underprivileged families, part of Helen's charitable endeavors. Cameras flashed, capturing Thomas's confident smile and Helen's poised elegance. She cradled her baby bump, and the audience cooed in admiration. On the surface, they looked like a shining example of generosity and family unity. Thomas announced a significant donation to the center, speaking passionately about the need to support communities in need. Helen added a few heartfelt words, receiving applause from the crowd. The moment seemed flawless until someone in the press pool shouted, "Mr. Greenwood, is it true you're having an affair with a European consultant named Ava Moretti?" Instantly, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Camera shutters clicked with renewed vigor, and microphones were thrust forward. Thomas, momentarily stunned, maintained his composure. But Helen went pale, her hand tightening on his arm. Reporters clamored, demanding a response. Thomas shook his head, forcing a neutral expression. "These are baseless rumors. My wife and I are fully committed to each other and to the forthcoming child we're blessed to welcome soon." His voice remained steady, betraying none of the internal panic. Helen forced a smile, though her eyes glistened with tears of anger and humiliation. The press officer quickly ended the conference, ushering the couple out amidst a barrage of questions. Outside, a sleek Bentley whisked them away. Inside the car, Helen broke down, burying her face in her hands. Thomas wrapped an arm around her, silently cursing Ava Moretti, whose leak was now public knowledge. Public speculation soared. Tabloids splashed headlines: "Millionaire love triangle, Thomas Greenwood's secret mistress." Social media erupted with theories about whether Helen would stay, whether Ava had damning evidence, and how this scandal might affect Greenwood real estate stocks. In a single day, Thomas's pristine image was tainted. Investors called Bob Ellington non-stop, expressing concern about the fallout. Meanwhile, Helen faced an onslaught of messages, sympathy from friends, prying questions from acquaintances, and even hateful comments from online trolls who bizarrely blamed her for not keeping her man satisfied. The strain threatened Helen's health. One night, she woke up, gasping, feeling intense abdominal pains. Thomas rushed her to the hospital, fearing premature labor. Tests showed the baby was still okay, but doctors warned she must avoid all unnecessary stress. If her blood pressure kept spiking, they might have to induce labor early. The news terrified Thomas. He resolved to do anything to protect Helen and the baby. And so he made a final, desperate choice. He confronted Ava at her suite, accompanied by 2 lawyers. "You've done enough damage," Thomas said, refusing to sit. "Here is a settlement offer. Sign this non-disclosure agreement, and you'll receive a generous financial package. But you are to break off all contact with me and the media permanently." Ava's face flushed with anger. "I told you I don't want your money. I want you." Thomas shook his head, voice shaking with righteous fury. "That will never happen. I love my wife. If you cared for me at all, you'd let me protect her from this scandal. But you only think of yourself." She tore the settlement papers and threw the shreds at him. "Get out. I don't want your dirty money." Thomas gestured to the lawyers. "We're done here." As he turned to leave, Ava's voice trembled, tears streaming. "Thomas, please," but he didn't look back. The lawyer's presence ensured no further meltdown. The door closed, leaving Ava alone with her regrets and her broken illusions. Now rejected and cornered, Ava watched her ambitions crumble. She had risked everything for a man who, it turned out, cherished his wife despite his moment of weakness. With the press swirling, her career as a financial consultant at Greenwood Real Estate was in ruins. She had been placed on indefinite leave pending an investigation. Friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. One evening, she sat on the suite's balcony, gazing at the shimmering Los Angeles skyline with a sense of emptiness. "What have I done?" she wondered. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother, calling from Italy. Ava considered ignoring it, but picked up at the last second. "Mama?" she said softly. Her mother's voice was anxious. "Ava, what are these headlines I'm seeing? Are you truly involved with a married American tycoon? This is disgraceful." Ava's throat tightened. "Mama, it's not what it seems. I thought he loved me." Her mother berated her for a while, lamenting the family shame, demanding that Ava return to Italy. Eventually, her tone softened into concern. "My child, come home. You sound hurt. We'll figure out the rest." But Ava couldn't imagine returning home in defeat. She'd soared too close to the sun, and now her wings were melting. The conversation ended with Ava sobbing uncontrollably on the balcony, tears blotting the phone screen. Despite the torrential fallout, Helen's condition stabilized under strict bed rest. Thomas spent every free moment by her side, massaging her feet, whispering apologies, reading baby books aloud. He arranged for her favorite dishes, guided her through breathing exercises recommended by the doctor, and reassured her daily of his commitment. Slowly, Helen let him back into her space, though her heart still ached with betrayal. One evening, as they lay in bed, Helen felt the baby kick strongly. She gasped, grabbing Thomas's hand to place it on her belly. The baby kicked again, and both parents froze, tears of wonder in their eyes. In that quiet, magical moment, it felt like forgiveness was possible, though not guaranteed. They were bound by a tiny life, one that deserved every chance at a loving family. Helen turned to Thomas, her voice shaking. "For the baby's sake, I'll try. I'll try to forgive you, to mend this marriage. But I need to see real change, Thomas. No more secrets, no more lies." His eyes glistened. "I promise, Helen, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll be here for you and our child forever." As Helen neared her due date, Thomas orchestrated a more thorough plan to mitigate the scandal. Bob Ellington held a press briefing, distributing a statement from Ava Moretti that denied the existence of any ongoing affair. The statement was ambiguous enough to suggest earlier rumors had been exaggerated. In truth, Ava's signature had been forged from an old HR document, a desperate legal tactic. Bob hoped would never be scrutinized too deeply. Public sentiment slowly shifted. Some believed that the affair rumors were simply a tabloid fabrication to tarnish the Greenwood name. However, the real shift occurred when Helen decided to give an exclusive interview to Deborah Simmons, a respected journalist known for fair coverage. From the Greenwood mansion's cozy living room, Helen spoke with measured honesty. "Thomas and I have faced challenges, as any couple does. The rumors have been hurtful, but we're moving forward together, focusing on our family and the charitable work that matters to us." Thomas sat beside her, occasionally chiming in but mostly letting Helen's serene presence guide the narrative. Viewers watched, saw Helen's courage, and were moved by her grace under fire. Her authenticity did more to rebuild Thomas's public image than any carefully crafted press release ever could. With the public narrative shifting back in their favor, Thomas and Helen prepared for the arrival of their child. Meanwhile, Ava found herself on the brink. Her repeated attempts to contact Thomas were ignored. She considered selling her story to the tabloids, but realized no major publication wanted to risk a defamation lawsuit against the powerful Greenwood family, especially when Greenwood lawyers were already circulating statements that the affair was fabricated. Drowning in legal threats, Ava decided on one last desperate gamble. Late one night, she arrived at the Greenwood estate, sneaking past the security gate when a delivery truck entered. She pounded on the massive front door, tears streaming down her face. "Thomas, open up!" Her voice quivered with heartbreak and urgency. She had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. Thomas, startled awake, hurried to see what the commotion was. Helen, clutching her belly in alarm, followed cautiously. Standing at the threshold in her nightgown, she watched as Thomas opened the door. Ava looked disheveled, mascara streaking her cheeks, hair disordered. For a moment, all three stood frozen in the moonlit foyer. Ava's voice broke the silence. "Please, Thomas, just talk to me. I lost my job, my friends. I'm alone in this city. You can't just abandon me." Helen stepped forward, gently but firmly. "You need to leave." Ava's eyes darted to Helen. "You've won. He chose you. I'm not trying to come between you now. I just need help. Alone, maybe, so I can fly home and start over." Thomas exhaled deeply, both pity and anger swirling inside him. He glanced at Helen, who nodded ever so slightly, remembering the lessons of empathy she'd practiced her whole life. Despite her pain, she didn't want to see anyone utterly destroyed. Thomas quietly said, "Ava, I'll give you what you need to go home, but after that, our communication ends. Do you understand?" Sobbing, Ava nodded, her tears a mixture of relief and heartbreak. Helen turned away, feeling both compassion for Ava's despair and lingering resentment for the betrayal that had nearly ruined her life. The final blow landed that very night. Thomas arranged for Bob Ellington to wire Ava enough funds for a plane ticket and some resettlement costs in Italy. Within days she was gone, leaving behind a swirl of rumors and regrets. Peace settled over the Greenwood mansion. The tabloids eventually found new scandals to chase, and Greenwood real estate regained stability. Helen's final weeks of pregnancy were calm, though tinged with apprehension. She and Thomas continued therapy sessions, determined to rebuild the foundation of their marriage. In those sessions, Helen vented her anger, hurt, and disappointment, while Thomas faced his guilt head-on, vowing never to take her trust for granted again. On a late summer morning, Helen went into labor. Thomas rushed her to the hospital, hands shaking as he held hers through each contraction. Elizabeth Greenwood and Helen's close friends prayed in the waiting room. After hours of labor, Helen gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Olivia Grace Greenwood. The moment Thomas cradled Olivia in his arms, tears streamed down his face. It was a transformative moment, an affirmation that love and family could endure, even after the deepest of wounds. Helen gazed at Thomas and their newborn daughter, heart swelling with cautious hope. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a new beginning, a chance to forge a future that wasn't dictated by mistakes and regrets, but by commitment, honesty, and love. In the weeks that followed, the Greenwood household was filled with the gentle sounds of a newborn and the bustling energy of hope. Thomas took paternity leave, surprising colleagues who never thought he'd step away from the company. But fatherhood changed his perspective. For the first time, profits and expansion didn't seem as important as the simple act of rocking his baby to sleep. Every day, Helen watched him, remembering the heartbreak. She still felt pangs of doubt, flashbacks of betrayal. But each time Thomas rose at 3:00 a.m. to feed Olivia, or postponed a business meeting to accompany Helen to a doctor's appointment, she saw a man trying to atone for his sins. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. In a final gesture of healing, Thomas handed over a folder to Helen one evening. Inside were dissolution papers for Greenwood Real Estate's European division in Rome. He explained, "I'm restructuring everything, stepping back from that office. It's where it started, and it's tainted in my mind. We'll move our focus to expansions here in the US. I want no reminders of what happened." Helen bit her lip, touched by the effort. "Thank you," she said, softly, leaning her head on his shoulder as they watched Olivia coo in her crib. 5 years later, the Greenwood family had grown into a unit of unwavering love. Helen resumed her philanthropic work, opening the Greenwood Davis Foundation dedicated to maternal health and women's shelters. Thomas continued to steer the family empire, but now with a more balanced approach, never letting ambition overshadow his devotion to Helen and Olivia. The scandal became a distant memory. Ava Moretti, rumored to be back in Italy, never resurfaced. Some said she opened a boutique shop, others speculated she married into minor European nobility. Thomas and Helen neither knew nor cared. Their life's focus remained each other and their child, with a second baby on the way. Old wounds left scars, but those scars became reminders of life lessons about honesty, loyalty, and the fragile bond of trust in marriage. No relationship is perfect. No individual is without fault. But when a family stands together in truth, love can overcome even the darkest storms. And so concludes the harrowing tale of Thomas Greenwood, Helen Davis, and Ava Moretti, 3 lives entwined in a web of love, ambition, and heartbreak. We've witnessed the bitter sting of betrayal and the resilience required to reclaim hope. Through fraught confessions, looming scandals, and breathtaking twists, Thomas learned a painful lesson. Love demands honesty, loyalty, and sometimes a second chance. Helen, for her part, chose forgiveness not out of weakness, but from the understanding that real love is worth saving if the heart remains true in the end. If this story captured your emotions, share it with others who crave dramatic, real-life fiction. Spread the word, drop a like, and subscribe so you'll never miss another tumultuous tale of love and deception. Together, let's delve into more gripping stories that illuminate the power of redemption and the priceless gift of second chances. Remember, sometimes, forgiveness is the bravest act of all,